Today I'm going to show you how to sew the Holly Tank View A. It's a very simple little tank and it's finished at the armholes and the neckline with self-facings. Here are the cut pieces. The front panel is cut one on the fold. That's the front there. The back panel is cut one pair. The back facing is also cut one pair, and the front facing is cut one on the fold. And the first thing we're going to do is to open up the front panel so that we've got the right side facing upwards, and we're going to get the back panels and place them right side down onto the front, so we've got right sides of the fabric together. We're going to join at the shoulders with a 1 centimetre seam, or 3/8 of an inch. And we're going to do the same with the facings. So we're opening up the front facing so that the right side is up. We're placing the right side of the back facing down, matching the shoulders, and we're going to sew a 1 centimetre seam, or 3/8 of an inch. Here we are at the machine, just sewing 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch. No need to overlock this seam because it will be completely encased with the facing. Then we're going to press those seams towards the back. And the shoulder seams of the facings we're going to press open. Now I'm laying the right sides of the fabric together, and I'm just matching up that neckline. We're going to sew around the neckline 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch. So here I am at the sewing machine just showing you how to sew right round the neckline, and it's a very small seam, only 1/4 of an inch. The reason for that is that it's a curved seam and we're going to be bagging this out, so we really don't want a large seam at all. Some patterns they get you to cut a full seam and then they trim it back. I just get you to sew a small seam. It's far less work. Okay, so I'm taking care to match up the shoulders there, and also taking care when you're going around the curves of the neckline where it's on the bias, just ensure that you don't stretch that fabric. And the next step is I've just folded the facing over the stitch line, and now I'm going to understitch the neckline right round. So understitching is when you're edge stitching really close to the seam. You're catching the seam allowance underneath, and you do that on things like facings, pocket mouths, binding, and that just helps the fabric roll towards the inside of the garment. It's just a professional, neat finish. So I'm sewing right round the neckline, and I'm sewing on the facing side. And I'm sewing right to the edge. And here I am just showing you how the garment looks after you've understitched right round the neckline. So we're going to fold the facing in towards the wrong side of the garment. There you go, and you can see that if you pressed that neckline it'd be really nice and neat and smooth. Okay, so this is the centre back button loop. I'm just folding that in half lengthwise with right sides of the fabric together, and I'm sewing about a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch, or about 5 millimeters from the folded edge. And next I'm going to get some sharp scissors, and I'm just going to cut into the folded edge, and we're going to use a hairpin to turn it to, and here I just put the hairpin in the wrong way, but now I've corrected it. So we're going to use a hairpin to turn the loop to the right side. So we're just poking it down, and we will see that it'll start to come out the other end with the right side out. And the loop is cut longer than you need, So you can just chop off that bad end, and then I'm going to measure 5 centimeters or 2 inches and trim it back. Okay, and now I'm going to fold the loop in half, and I'll be sewing it to the left side of the garment at the back. So with the raw edge of the loop lined up with the centre back edge, just stitch it about 1/4 of an inch in from the edge. Okay, so with right sides of the fabric together, we're going to match up the shoulders, the underarms, and we're going to sew around the armhole 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimeters. Again, it's a very small seam, and we are dealing with children's wear, so they are quite small garments, and these armholes and necklines can get quite little. So a 6 millimeter seam is really handy for that. Having said that, even for women's wear, we still do a 6 millimeter seam for anything that's bagged out. That's quite standard practice for garment manufacture. Okay, so here I am sewing around the armholes 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch. I'm taking a lot of care to make sure that those edges match up, the shoulder seams match up, and as I go around these little curves at the lower armholes, I'm taking care not to stretch the fabric. Okay, and here I am, I'm about to fold the facing over the stitch line, and I'm going to understitch the lower part of the armholes. So like we did with the neckline, we just want to stitch on the facing side, close to the seam, and we'll be catching the seam allowance underneath. So this understitching is just going to help that fabric roll towards the inside of the garment really neatly. You'll find it much easier to press the garment if you've understitched around the neckline and the armholes. And here I am doing the other side. So you're going to do that to the front, the back, on the left hand side and the right hand side. Here I am showing you the right side and how it looks on the wrong side. Okay, so I've just laid the garment out on the table. I've got the wrong side of the facing up, and we're going to turn the garment to the right side. So what I'm doing is poking the back panels through the shoulder cavity. And as you can see, just a little bit of manipulation to get the fabric to move through that gap there, and then once you get it going, it's really easy. You can see the fabric is now on the right side, and the seams are hidden on the inside of the facings. And I'm just going to do the other side now, so turning it through to the right side. You might want to give it a bit of a press at this stage. I haven't, I've just sort of worked it with my fingers. I'm using linen, which is pretty easy to work with. You can sort of smooth it out with your fingers, but if you're using other sorts of fabrics, it pays to press as you go. Now we're going to close up the centre back seam. So I've found there's a neck towards probably about 2/3 of the way up the centre back, and that's where I've put that pin. And then now I'm working with the facing here, and I've identified the neck there, and I'm putting a pin in there. So we're going to sew that little short seam 1 centimetre, 3/8 of an inch, and then we're going to sew the back below that neck 2/3 of the way up. The gap that we're leaving in between, that's going to be the centre back split. So here I am sewing the lower part of the facing up to the neck. And that's a 1 centimetre seam or 3/8 of an inch. And now I'm on the back panel, starting at the neck, which is about 2/3 of the way up the back panel, and I'm sewing right down to the hem edge. Okay, so here you can see that I've left a big gap for the centre back split. Now I'm reaching up into the wrong side of the garment so that the right sides of the fabric are now together, and I'm going to sew a 1 centimetre seam from the neck down to the bottom of the split, and that's how I'm going to bag out the split. So there I have just sewn a 1 centimetre seam. Now I'm going to do the same on the other side. So reaching up to the inside of the garment, pulling it out so that the right sides of the fabric are together, and I'm going to close that gap. So that's from the neck edge down to the neck with a 1 centimetre seam or 3/8 of an inch. And I've just done that seam, and I'm using my thumb to help turn the fabric to the right side, and then reaching up into the other side and turning it to the right side. And then you can see that the centre back split is now neatly bagged out. Again, it's quite helpful to give it a bit of a press as you go, which I haven't done. I should have done it, but I think I was rushing a bit. Okay, so now I am going to cut into the seam allowance just on one side because I want to overlock that centre back seam, and I want to overlock it with the seam closed. And there you can see that I've overlocked that seam now. Next, we're going to close up the side seams. So I'm putting right sides of the fabric together again, and I'm going to sew a centimetre seam the entire way up the sides. Okay, here I am. I'm starting at the hem, sewing 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch. I've just pinned